Jasmine Washington's private jet sat empty on the tarmac as she boarded a commercial flight in disguise. When an entitled passenger stole her seat, she never imagined it would end with the CEO of Wingspan Airlines kneeling before her, begging forgiveness while federal agents swarmed the aircraft. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. This tale of justice and comeuppance is one you won't want to miss, so hit that like button and subscribe to catch more stories about standing up against discrimination. Now, let's see how a simple seat dispute turned into a national incident that changed an entire airline forever. At 24 years old, Jasmine Washington had already accomplished what most people couldn't achieve in several lifetimes. The tech prodigy had created FinFreedom, a revolutionary AI-driven financial app that democratized investment opportunities for low-income communities. What started as a college project in her MIT dorm room had transformed into a tech empire valued at over $7 billion, with Jasmine's personal fortune estimated at $4.2 billion. Despite her massive wealth and growing influence in Silicon Valley, Jasmine valued her privacy above all else. Fame had never been her goal. The constant spotlight felt intrusive, especially as one of the few black female billionaires in America. Paparazzi stalked her movements, tech blogs dissected her every business decision, and social media constantly buzzed with speculation about her personal life. Another day, another disguise, Jasmine muttered to herself as she applied minimal makeup in her Manhattan penthouse. She slipped on a pair of non-prescription glasses with thick black frames, pulled her usually styled hair into a simple ponytail, and selected the most ordinary outfit from her closet: faded jeans, a plain gray sweatshirt, and worn sneakers. Jasmine had grown up in Mechanicsville, a struggling neighborhood in southwest Atlanta, raised by her grandmother after losing both parents in a car accident when she was just 8 years old. Their small two-bedroom apartment often housed extended family members down on their luck, with Grandma Pearl working double shifts as a hospital custodian to keep everyone fed. "You're twice as smart, so you'll need to work twice as hard," Grandma Pearl would tell her while helping with homework at their kitchen table, the only quiet spot in their crowded home. Those words became Jasmine's mantra through public school, where she excelled despite outdated textbooks and overcrowded classrooms. By 16, Jasmine had taught herself coding using free library computers, eventually earning a full scholarship to MIT. There, the systemic barriers became even more apparent. In study groups, her ideas were ignored until repeated by white male classmates. Professors often mistook her for janitorial staff when she stayed late in computer labs. At tech conferences, people assumed she was someone's assistant rather than the creator of groundbreaking algorithms. Yet she persevered, channeling frustration into innovation. FinFreedom was born from her determination to create financial literacy tools for communities like the one she grew up in. When venture capitalists dismissed her idea as niche, she bootstrapped the company herself, proving them wrong as the app gained millions of users within months. Now, the constant scrutiny had become overwhelming. Last week, a tech blogger had posted photos of her having dinner with her grandmother, speculating wildly about her mystery date. The invasion of privacy had been the final straw. She'd decided to travel incognito whenever possible, including today's trip. Jasmine checked her reflection one last time. The person staring back looked nothing like the polished tech executive featured on magazine covers. Perfect. She grabbed her simple backpack containing her laptop and essential documents for tomorrow's keynote speech at Tech Forward, the industry's premier conference in San Francisco. Rather than using her private jet, which would attract attention at both airports, she'd opted for a commercial flight on Wingspan Airlines. She'd even chosen economy plus rather than first class to avoid recognition. Her executive assistant, Zoe Chen, had protested the decision. "You know you own part of Wingspan, right?" Zoe had reminded her during their morning call. "Through your investment portfolio. You could literally take the entire plane if you wanted." Jasmine had laughed. "That's exactly why nobody can know it's me. I'm meeting with their board tomorrow about increasing our stake. I need to experience their service as a regular customer." As her rideshare approached LaGuardia, Jasmine felt the familiar weight settle onto her shoulders. The exhaustion wasn't physical but emotional, the constant code switching, the need to prove herself in rooms full of white executives who questioned her expertise despite her success. Even with billions in the bank, she still encountered the same prejudices she'd faced as a scholarship student. Just another day of being underestimated, she whispered to herself, a sad smile playing on her lips as she stepped out of the car and into the bustling terminal. LaGuardia's terminal hummed with the controlled chaos typical of New York airports on a Tuesday morning. Business travelers clutched coffee cups while tapping furiously on phones. Families corralled exhausted children in overstuffed carry-ons. Gate agents made announcements that dissolved into the general din of rolling suitcases and beeping carts. Jasmine navigated the terminal with practiced ease, keeping her head down as she passed magazine stands displaying business journals with her competitors' faces on the covers. The anonymity felt refreshing. No one gave her a second glance as she joined the security line, removed her laptop from her backpack, and proceeded through the scanner without the usual whispers of recognition. At Gate 37, Wingspan Airlines Flight 1422 to San Francisco was preparing for boarding. Jasmine observed the interactions between airline staff and passengers with professional interest. A middle-aged white woman in an expensive suit approached the counter, complaining loudly about her seat assignment. Within moments, the gate agent was typing rapidly, apologizing profusely, and printing a new boarding pass with a first-class upgrade. Minutes later, an elderly Latino man with limited English made a similar request. The same agent tersely explained that no changes could be made and turned to help the next customer before he could fully express his concern. The contrast wasn't subtle. While waiting, Jasmine spotted several familiar faces from the tech world boarding with the first-class group. Devin Williams, CEO of Rapid Tech, nodded to Xavier Lopez of MergePoint Ventures as they bypassed the main line. She'd sat across from both men in investment meetings, but neither gave her disguised self a second glance as they disappeared down the jetway. Now boarding Group 1 passengers and those needing special assistance, announced the gate agent, her practiced smile never reaching her eyes. Jasmine watched as first-class and priority passengers streamed through the gate, many brushing past those waiting in the regular line without acknowledgement. A tall, silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored navy suit strode past, his leather briefcase swinging carelessly into a young mother struggling with a car seat. He continued without pausing, despite the woman's startled expression. "That's Ethan Caldwell," whispered a woman nearby to her companion. "Banking executive. My brother works for his firm. Apparently, he's a nightmare boss." Jasmine filed the information away automatically, a habit from years of business networking. She pulled out her phone to check her messages. Zoe had sent several updates about tomorrow's presentation at the conference and a reminder about the Wingspan Airlines investment meeting. Now boarding Group 3, called the gate agent after what felt like an eternity. Jasmine collected her backpack and joined the line. When she reached the podium, the agent barely glanced at her boarding pass before waving her through with considerably less enthusiasm than she'd shown the premium passengers. The jetway was crowded with people struggling to maneuver luggage. Jasmine patiently waited her turn to board, observing how the flight attendant greeted passengers. Again, the pattern was unmistakable: warm smiles and personalized greetings for those turning left toward first class, cursory nods for everyone else. "Welcome aboard," the flight attendant said flatly as Jasmine stepped onto the aircraft. She made her way down the narrow aisle, past the drawn curtain separating first class, to row 14. Her seat, 14A, was a window in Economy Plus, offering a few precious inches of extra legroom that would make the 6-hour flight marginally more comfortable. After stowing her backpack under the seat in front, Jasmine settled in, positioning her neck pillow against the window. She pulled out her phone to send Zoe a quick message confirming she'd boarded successfully. "Excuse me," she said to a passing flight attendant whose name tag read, Rebecca Bennett. "Could I have some water, please?" Rebecca barely paused. "We'll begin beverage service after takeoff," she replied without making eye contact, continuing down the aisle. Jasmine noticed the same attendant immediately fetch a pre-departure champagne for a passenger in the row ahead when asked moments later. The double standard was so commonplace that Jasmine felt almost numb to it. Almost. The plane gradually filled with passengers filing past her row. The middle seat next to her remained empty as boarding continued, which she considered a small victory. Perhaps she could spread out her notes during the flight to prepare for tomorrow's presentation. Just as the final boarding announcement echoed through the cabin, her temporary moment of good fortune evaporated. The silver-haired man she'd observed earlier in the terminal, Ethan Caldwell, appeared at her row, scowling at his boarding pass and then at her. Ethan Caldwell stood in the aisle, his imposing 6'2" frame blocking passengers attempting to reach their seats behind him. His eyes, cold blue and calculating, darted from his boarding pass to Jasmine with unmistakable disdain. "You're in my seat," he stated flatly, not a question but an accusation. Jasmine glanced up from her phone, momentarily confused. She double-checked her boarding pass. "I'm in 14A. This is my assigned seat." Caldwell's jaw tightened. He thrust his boarding pass toward her face. "I always get window seats." "Always." "See? I'm in row 14. Jasmine leaned forward to examine his boarding pass without touching it. "Your ticket says 14B. That's the aisle seat, not the window." A flash of irritation crossed his face. "I know what my ticket says. I'm telling you I always get window seats. My assistant must have made a mistake." By now, a line had formed behind Caldwell. Passengers shifted impatiently, checking watches and sighing loudly. Jasmine kept her voice measured and calm. "I understand that's frustrating, but this is my assigned seat. Perhaps the flight attendant can help you switch with someone else if a window seat is available." Caldwell's nostrils flared. "Listen, I don't have time for this. I have a meeting with clients immediately after landing. I need to sleep on this flight, and I can't sleep in aisle seats." "Sir, is there a problem?" Flight attendant Rebecca Bennett appeared beside him, her previously automated expression now transformed into one of concerned attentiveness. "Yes, there's a problem," Caldwell said before Jasmine could respond. "I need a window seat, and she won't move." Rebecca turned to Jasmine, her tone shifting to something colder. "Ma'am, would you mind taking another seat? Mr. Caldwell is a frequent flyer with us." Jasmine blinked, momentarily taken aback by the blatant favoritism. "I'm sorry, but this is my assigned seat. I specifically selected it when booking." "It's just a seat," Rebecca said with thinly veiled impatience. "We have another available in row 27. Row 27 isn't economy plus," Jasmine pointed out. "I paid extra for this seat." Caldwell made a dismissive sound. "I'll cover the difference." "What's that, $50? Here." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a crisp $100 bill, attempting to hand it to Jasmine as if she were a coat check attendant. The gesture sent a wave of indignation through her. She didn't move to take the money. "This isn't about the cost. This is my assigned seat, which I selected for specific reasons." "Look," Caldwell said, his voice lowering but taking on a sharper edge, "I don't think you understand how this works. People like me get certain considerations. That's just how the world works." The implication hung in the air between them. Jasmine felt a familiar churning in her stomach. The same feeling she'd experienced in countless boardrooms and venture capital meetings when her ideas were dismissed without consideration. "People like you," she repeated quietly. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "Wingspan Diamond members who spend hundreds of thousands annually with this airline." But clearly, he gave her plain clothes a contemptuous once-over, "You wouldn't know anything about that. I'm not sure you even belong in Economy Plus." A woman seated across the aisle, a black woman in her mid-40s wearing a tailored burgundy blazer, looked up sharply. She glanced between Jasmine and Caldwell, her expression hardening as she grasped what was happening. Discreetly, she reached for her phone. "Mr. Caldwell, perhaps you could take your assigned seat for now," Rebecca suggested, though her tone made it more of a courtesy than a directive. I'll see if we can find another arrangement after takeoff. That's unacceptable, Caldwell snapped. Why should I be inconvenienced because she won't be reasonable? Just move her to economy where she belongs. The last phrase landed with devastating clarity. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably but remained silent spectators. The woman in the burgundy blazer, however, had begun recording the interaction on her phone, angling it discreetly. "Sir, my name is Jasmine, and I belong exactly where my boarding pass placed me," Jasmine said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "If you'd like to speak with the gate agent about changing your seat assignment for future flights, I'm sure they can accommodate that preference. But for this flight, 14A is my seat." Rebecca sighed dramatically. "Ma'am, would you please just move to 27C? It would solve this problem quickly, and we need to close the cabin doors." "The problem," Jasmine responded evenly, "isn't my unwillingness to move. The problem is being asked to give up the seat I paid for because someone else feels entitled to it." "You know what?" Caldwell's voice rose. "I don't have time for this nonsense. Get your supervisor." Rebecca nodded. "I'll get Carlos." She hurried toward the front of the cabin. As they waited, the woman in the burgundy blazer leaned slightly toward Jasmine. "I'm Maya Carter," she said quietly. "What's happening here isn't right. I'm documenting it, if that's okay with you." Jasmine gave an almost imperceptible nod of appreciation. The solidarity, even from a stranger, felt like a lifeline in the increasingly hostile environment. Rebecca returned with Carlos Dominguez, the lead flight attendant, a man in his late 30s with a practiced customer service smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What seems to be the issue here?" Carlos asked, directing the question to Caldwell rather than assessing both sides. Caldwell launched into his version of events, conveniently omitting his comments about where Jasmine belonged. Throughout his explanation, Carlos nodded sympathetically, occasionally giving Jasmine skeptical glances. "I see," Carlos said when Caldwell finished. "Ma'am, in situations like this, we try to accommodate our frequent flyers. Would you mind taking the seat in row 27? I can offer you a complimentary beverage during the flight." Jasmine felt her patience wearing thin but maintained her composure. "With respect, a complimentary beverage doesn't equate to the Economy Plus seat I purchased. I have my boarding pass showing this is my assigned seat, and I'd like to stay in it." Carlos's pleasant expression faltered. "Ma'am, we're trying to find a solution here." "The solution is simple," Jasmine replied. "Mr. Caldwell takes his assigned seat, 14B, and the flight proceeds as scheduled." Caldwell's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. I'm not sitting in an aisle seat for 6 hours because she's being stubborn." As the standoff continued, more passengers began to take notice. Some pulled out phones, sensing the brewing conflict. Jasmine remained seated, calm but resolute, while Caldwell became increasingly agitated. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, loud enough for several rows to hear. "I could buy this entire row of seats if I wanted to." "Yet you didn't," Jasmine observed quietly. "You purchased 14B. Maya Carter, still recording, couldn't suppress a small smile at the response. The tension in the cabin thickened as Carlos shifted uncomfortably between Jasmine and the increasingly irate Ethan Caldwell. Other passengers watched with undisguised interest, some recording discreetly on their phones, others whispering among themselves. "Let me be perfectly clear," Carlos said, his customer service veneer cracking slightly. "We need to resolve this quickly so we can depart on time." "I agree," Jasmine replied calmly. "Mr. Caldwell should take his assigned seat so we can all be on our way." Carlos turned to her with thinly veiled impatience. "Ma'am, we're trying to accommodate everyone here. Mr. Caldwell is a Diamond status member who flies with us weekly." Jasmine reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "I understand you're in a difficult position, but I'm going to start documenting this interaction." She opened her camera app and positioned it to record the conversation. "Excuse me." Caldwell protested immediately. She can't record me without consent. That's a violation of privacy. Carlos nodded in agreement. Ma'am, we have policies against recording other passengers without permission. Interesting, Jasmine noted. Those policies didn't seem to apply to the passengers who have been recording this interaction for the past 5 minutes. She gestured subtly towards several people in nearby rows with phones raised. I'm simply protecting myself in a situation where I'm being discriminated against. The word discriminated hit like a thunderclap. Carlos's eyes widened as he realized the potential implications. That's absurd, Caldwell scoffed. Playing the race card when you're simply being asked to move seats. A murmur rippled through the nearby passengers. Maya Carter leaned forward in her seat across the aisle. Is it absurd? She asked, her voice clear and measured. I've been observing this entire interaction, and I haven't seen any white passengers being asked to give up their assigned seats to accommodate someone else's preference. Carlos raised his hands in a placating gesture. No one is discriminating here. This is simply about finding a solution that works for everyone. Then the solution is obvious, Jasmine replied. Everyone sits in their assigned seats. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the arrival of Captain Keith Reynolds, a gray-haired man with the authoritative presence cultivated through decades in the cockpit. His appearance in the economy cabin immediately silenced the surrounding conversations. What's the delay back here? He asked Carlos directly. We're 15 minutes behind schedule already. Carlos quickly explained the situation, presenting it as a passenger refusing to move seats to accommodate a Diamond member. The framing wasn't lost on Jasmine or Maya, who exchanged knowing glances. Captain Reynolds turned to Jasmine with barely concealed annoyance. Ma'am, I understand you're in your assigned seat, but we need to get this aircraft moving. The simplest solution is for you to relocate to 27C. The simplest solution, Jasmine countered, still recording, would be for Mr. Caldwell to sit in his assigned seat, 14B. Why is the burden on me to accommodate his preference? The captain's jaw tightened. Ma'am, as the captain of this aircraft, I have final authority over seating arrangements for safety and operational purposes. Safety? Jasmine raised an eyebrow. How does Mr. Caldwell's desire for a window seat relate to safety? This continued disruption is becoming a safety issue, the captain stated firmly. If we can't resolve this immediately, I'll be forced to involve airport security. The threat hung in the air. Jasmine felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced years ago when presenting her app to a room full of venture capitalists who spoke over her, ignored her projections, and ultimately passed on what would become a multi-billion-dollar company. The memory strengthened her resolve. She'd faced worse than this and prevailed. Captain Reynolds, she said, making sure to capture his name badge in her recording, are you threatening to have me removed from this flight for sitting in my assigned seat while allowing another passenger to demand my seat based on his status and preferences? The captain bristled at her directness. I'm trying to find a resolution that allows us to depart. As am I, Jasmine responded. And that resolution is for everyone to sit in their assigned seats. If that's not acceptable, I'd like your full name and employee ID for my report to the Department of Transportation regarding discriminatory treatment by Wingspan Airlines. At the mention of a DOT report, Maya Carter sat up straighter. I'd like to add that I've documented this entire interaction and would be willing to provide my contact information as a witness. A few other passengers murmured in agreement. The momentum was shifting, and Captain Reynolds sensed it. His expression darkened. That's enough. If you're refusing to comply with crew instructions, I have no choice but to have you removed from the aircraft. Maya stood up. Captain, with respect, asking someone to vacate their assigned seat based on another passenger's preference is not a legitimate crew instruction. It's customer service, not safety related. Ma'am, please stay out of this, the captain warned. I can't do that, Maya replied firmly. Not when I'm witnessing something so plainly unjust. As if on cue, 2 security personnel appeared at the end of the aisle, summoned by a text from Rebecca. The situation was escalating beyond anyone's control. Have you ever been in a situation where you stood your ground despite pressure to back down? Would you have done what Jasmine did, or would you have moved to avoid conflict? Comment number 1 if you think Jasmine was right to stand her ground, or number 2 if you think she should have moved to prevent the situation from escalating. Give this video a like if you've ever witnessed discrimination in a public setting, and subscribe to see what happens next in this incredible true story. How do you think the airline security will handle this standoff? Will Jasmine be forcibly removed from her rightful seat? Let's continue and find out what happened when this billionaire finally revealed her true identity. The security personnel moved purposefully down the aisle toward row 14, their expressions grim and determined. Passengers instinctively leaned away as they passed, creating as much space as possible in the confined cabin. The atmosphere had transformed from annoyed impatience to tense anticipation. Jasmine remained seated, her posture straight but not confrontational. She continued recording as the security officers reached her row. "Ma'am," the first officer said, "we've been informed that you're refusing to comply with crew instructions. We need you to gather your belongings and come with us." Maya Carter immediately stood again. "This passenger is in her assigned seat. She's done nothing wrong." From several rows behind, another voice called out, "I've got the whole thing on video. She's just sitting in her own seat." More voices joined in support, creating a chorus of protest that clearly caught the security officers off guard. They exchanged uncertain glances, not having anticipated resistance from multiple passengers. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. "This is not a debate. As captain, I have final authority on this aircraft. Authority that should be exercised fairly," Maya challenged, her voice steady and clear. "Would you be removing her if she looked different? If she were wearing expensive clothes or sitting in first class?" The pointed questions hung in the air. Jasmine could see the captain's composure fracturing, his authority undermined by the valid challenges to his judgment. In that moment, Jasmine made a decision. She'd wanted to travel anonymously, to experience the airline as any other passenger would. But now, innocent passengers were putting themselves at risk to defend her. The principle mattered, but not at their expense. "Before this goes any further," she said quietly, reaching into her bag, "I think there's something you should know." She pulled out her wallet and removed her ID, along with a business card embossed with the distinctive teal logo of FinFreedom. She handed them to the nearest security officer, whose eyes widened in recognition. "I'm Jasmine Washington," she stated simply. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The security officer almost dropped her ID in shock. Carlos audibly gasped. Captain Reynolds leaned forward to confirm what he was seeing, his face draining of color. "Jasmine Washington," he repeated, his voice suddenly an octave higher. "The Jasmine Washington." Ethan Caldwell, who had been smugly watching the proceedings from the aisle seat he'd refused to take, now stared at her with dawning horror. "The founder of FinFreedom?" he asked, his previous arrogance evaporating. I had no idea. Your app revolutionized my firm's approach to client financial education. We recommend it to all our customers." The transformation in his tone was as transparent as it was revolting. Jasmine gave him a level look. "Yet a moment ago, you didn't think I belonged in Economy Plus." Caldwell flushed deep red. "That was a misunderstanding. I would never." "You did," Maya interjected. "We all heard you." Jasmine thought back to countless similar moments throughout her career. The investor who'd ignored her emails for months, then suddenly became her biggest champion after her first round of successful funding. The tech conference organizer who'd rejected her speaker application, then begged her to keynote once her company valuation hit 9 figures. The real estate agent who'd shown her only modest homes in predominantly black neighborhoods until seeing her bank statement. Her success had changed how people treated her, but it hadn't eliminated the prejudice, only masked it beneath a veneer of respect born from her net worth rather than her humanity. Captain Reynolds cleared his throat, his entire demeanor transformed. "Ms. Washington, Please accept my sincere apologies for this misunderstanding. If you'd be more comfortable in first class, I'd be happy to arrange an immediate upgrade." "That won't be necessary," Jasmine replied coolly. "I'm perfectly comfortable in my assigned seat, 14A. Carlos's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, and his eyes grew even wider. He leaned toward the captain, whispering urgently in his ear. The captain's expression shifted from embarrassment to alarm. At that moment, Jasmine's phone rang. The screen displayed Zoe's name. She answered, putting it on speaker. "Jasmine, I just got an alert about a situation on your flight," Zoe's voice came through clearly. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Zoe. Just a seating misunderstanding that's being resolved." "Well, there's something you should know," Zoe continued. "Wingspan Airlines isn't just in your investment portfolio. Your firm owns a 12% stake in their parent company. You're literally one of their largest individual shareholders." The information landed like a bomb in the already tense cabin. Captain Reynolds swayed slightly on his feet. Carlos looked as though he might be sick. "And," Zoe added, seemingly unaware of the impact her words were having, "don't forget you're meeting with their board tomorrow about increasing that investment to potentially become their largest shareholder." The CEO Marcus Bradford confirmed the meeting personally last week. Jasmine thanked Zoe and ended the call, suddenly aware that the entire cabin had fallen completely silent. Even the previously crying baby a few rows back seemed to sense the dramatic shift in power dynamics. Ethan Caldwell broke the silence. "Ms. Washington, I'm a huge admirer of your work. Your integration of AI into personal finance tools was absolutely groundbreaking. I'd love to discuss potential synergies between our companies sometime." The transparency of his pivot was almost comical. Just minutes earlier, he'd been demanding she be removed from her seat based on her appearance. "I appreciate the thought, Mr. Caldwell," Jasmine replied, her tone neutral. "But I make it a policy not to do business with people who show different faces depending on who they think I am." Maya Carter couldn't suppress a smile at the response. Several passengers nodded in agreement, while others whispered excitedly as they realized a famous billionaire was aboard their flight. The security officers had already begun backing away, clearly eager to distance themselves from the situation. Captain Reynolds was frantically texting someone, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Mr. Caldwell," Carlos said with newfound assertiveness, "if you could please take your assigned seat in 14B, we can prepare for departure." Caldwell hesitated, then meekly slid into the aisle seat beside Jasmine. The proximity was uncomfortable for both of them, but particularly for Caldwell, who now couldn't seem to make himself small enough. "Ms. Washington," Captain Reynolds said, his voice strained with forced pleasantness, "again, my sincerest apologies. If there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable, please don't hesitate to ask." "Actually," Jasmine replied, "I'd appreciate it if you could ensure that Rebecca Bennett and yourself are not on duty during my return flight next week. I don't believe we'd have a productive service experience." The captain nodded stiffly before retreating toward the cockpit. Carlos lingered a moment longer. "We'll be taking off shortly," he assured her, then leaned closer to whisper, "Thank you for not escalating this further. Some of us have families to support." The comment caught Jasmine off guard. It was both an acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a plea for mercy, a reminder that behind corporate policies and biased behaviors were individual people with livelihoods at stake. As Carlos moved away to prepare for departure, Jasmine's phone buzzed with notifications. Videos of the confrontation were already circulating on social media with hashtags like #SeatJustice and #WingspanRacism. What had begun as a personal stand for dignity was rapidly becoming a viral moment with potentially far-reaching consequences for the airline. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Ms. Washington, I truly am sorry." Jasmine turned to look at him directly. "Mr. Caldwell, your apology means nothing if it's only coming because you now know who I am. The problem isn't what you did to me. It's what you would still do to someone else who doesn't have my resources or platform." He had no response to that, and for the first time since boarding, Ethan Caldwell fell completely silent. In the Wingspan Airlines Operations Center at LaGuardia Airport, alarm bells were figuratively ringing. The center's multiple screens displaying flight statuses, weather patterns, and operational metrics were temporarily ignored as staff clustered around a supervisor's computer displaying Twitter feeds and rapidly multiplying video clips. "This is a Category 5 PR disaster," muttered Operations Director Vivian Palmer, a veteran airline executive who had weathered numerous crises during her 25-year career. "Get me Bradford on the phone. Now." While a subordinate frantically dialed the CEO's number, Vivian scanned the growing social media storm. The hashtags #WingspanRacism and #Jasmine Washington were trending nationally, with video clips from multiple angles showing Captain Reynolds threatening to remove a calm, articulate black woman from her rightful seat. "Flight 1422 status." Vivian barked to the room at large. Still at the gate, someone called back. Door closed but no pushback clearance requested yet. Vivian made a quick decision. "Hold that aircraft. No departure authorization until we sort this out." "Already on it," her assistant confirmed. "ATC has been notified." In the plush locker room of the Westchester Country Club, Marcus Bradford was having a perfectly pleasant Tuesday morning. The 58-year-old CEO of Wingspan Airlines had just completed the front 9 holes with impressive scores and was changing his golf shoes when his phone erupted with consecutive alerts. He glanced at the screen, expecting routine operational updates. Instead, he found 27 missed calls, 16 text messages, and an email from the board chair marked "Urgent, immediate action required." Bradford frowned as he opened the most recent text from Vivian Palmer: "Major incident with Jasmine Washington on Flight 1422. Discrimination allegations. Going viral. Call immediately." His blood ran cold. Jasmine Washington was not just any passenger. As the financial wunderkind behind FinFreedom and one of the most influential black entrepreneurs in America, she commanded enormous respect in business circles. More importantly, her investment firm held a significant stake in Wingspan's parent company, with a crucial meeting scheduled tomorrow to discuss increasing that investment. Bradford abandoned his golf game without explanation to his playing partners, hurrying to his car while dialing Vivian's number. "Tell me exactly what happened," he demanded when she answered. As Vivian recounted the events unfolding on Flight 1422, Bradford's face grew increasingly pale. By the time she finished, he was already speeding toward LaGuardia. "I'm 20 minutes out," he said grimly. "Keep that plane at the gate. I'm handling this personally." Back on the aircraft, the atmosphere had transformed dramatically. Flight attendants who had previously ignored Jasmine now hovered anxiously nearby, offering water, snacks, pillows, and increasingly desperate smiles. Captain Reynolds's voice came over the intercom, noticeably strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're experiencing a minor, technical issue that needs to be resolved before departure. We expect to be underway shortly." The passengers exchanged knowing looks. The technical issue was sitting in row 14, documenting everything on her phone. Jasmine's device buzzed with an incoming call from Zoe. "You've created quite a situation," Zoe said without preamble. "Bradford cancelled his golf game and is racing to the airport. Wingspan stock is down 3% in just the last 15 minutes as those videos spread." "That wasn't my intention," Jasmine replied quietly. "I know," Zoe acknowledged. "But sometimes the most powerful statements are the ones we make by simply refusing to be moved." The phrase resonated with Jasmine, reminding her of civil rights leaders who had come before her. She had never sought to be an activist, focusing instead on creating change through economic opportunity. Yet here she was, making a stand in the most literal sense. Maya Carter leaned across the aisle. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know, a representative from the Federal Aviation Administration just boarded. He's speaking with the captain now." Jasmine thanked her for the information. The situation was escalating beyond anything she had anticipated when she'd simply refused to give up her assigned seat. At the front of the aircraft, a stern-faced woman in a transportation department uniform was indeed engaged in intense conversation with Captain Reynolds and Carlos. Their gestures were becoming increasingly animated as the discussion continued. Ethan Caldwell, still seated uncomfortably in 14B, stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with everyone. His phone had been buzzing constantly, but he ignored it, seeming to hope that if he remained perfectly still, he might somehow become invisible. Several rows ahead, a flight attendant opened the aircraft door. 3 individuals in business attire boarded, led by a woman who identified herself to the cabin crew as Catherine Jenkins from Wingspan's corporate communications department. The group huddled near the galley, speaking in urgent whispers while repeatedly glancing toward row 14. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Washington, this is Marcus Bradford, CEO of Wingspan Airlines. I'm 5 minutes from the terminal. I respectfully request the opportunity to speak with you in person before this situation escalates further." She showed the message to Maya, who raised her eyebrows. The CEO himself? They're taking this seriously now. They should have taken basic human dignity seriously from the beginning, Jasmine replied, but sent a brief acknowledgement to Bradford's message. The aircraft door opened again. This time, Rebecca Bennett approached, her previous dismissiveness replaced with visible anxiety. "Ms. Washington," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "Mr. Bradford has arrived and requests a moment of your time in the jetway. Captain Reynolds and I have been asked to join you." The invitation carried clear implications. Disciplinary action was imminent. Part of Jasmine felt satisfaction at the accountability, but another part recognized the fear in Rebecca's eyes. Like Carlos, she likely had family depending on her income. "I'll speak with Mr. Bradford," Jasmine agreed, rising from her seat. She turned to Maya. "Would you mind coming with me as a witness?" "Absolutely," Maya replied without hesitation. As they moved toward the front of the aircraft, passengers offered words of support and encouragement. Some held up phones showing the social media response, tens of thousands of retweets, comments expressing outrage at Wingspan's treatment of her, and calls for boycotts of the airline. In the narrow confines of the jetway stood Marcus Bradford, his golf attire looking decidedly out of place amid the corporate crisis. His face was flushed from rushing to the airport, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Ms. Washington," he began, extending his hand. "I cannot adequately express my mortification at what has occurred today." Behind him stood the FAA representative, 2 corporate executives, and a nervous-looking Captain Reynolds. Rebecca hung back near the aircraft door, clearly hoping to remain unnoticed. Jasmine assessed Bradford coolly. "Mr. Bradford, I selected Wingspan for today's flight specifically to experience your service as an ordinary customer before our investment meeting tomorrow. The experience has been illuminating, though not in the way I had hoped." Bradford winced. "I understand completely. What happened was inexcusable and does not reflect our company values. Doesn't it?" Jasmine challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, it perfectly reflected your company's values. Your staff demonstrated exactly who matters to Wingspan and who doesn't. They showed me precisely how you treat passengers based on appearance rather than humanity." The CEO had no ready response. In the awkward silence, Captain Reynolds stepped forward. "Ms. Washington, as captain of this aircraft, I take full responsibility for what occurred. My handling of the situation was unprofessional and," he hesitated, then added, "discriminatory. There's no other word for it." The admission seemed to physically pain him, but Jasmine appreciated the honesty. It was a start, at least. "What happens now?" she asked, addressing Bradford directly. "That's entirely up to you," he replied, the power dynamic between them irrevocably shifted. "We're prepared to implement whatever actions you deem appropriate." She considered her options carefully. This moment could be leveraged for personal retribution or structural change, and Jasmine had always been more interested in systems than individuals. This conversation should continue tomorrow at our scheduled meeting, she decided. For now, I'd like to return to my seat, my assigned seat, and proceed to San Francisco as planned. Bradford nodded, relief evident in his expression. Of course. And Mr. Caldwell will remain in his assigned seat as well, Jasmine stated firmly. This incident isn't about him anymore. It's about your company culture and policies. As she turned to reboard the aircraft, Maya beside her, Bradford called after her. Ms. Washington. Your return flight reservation has been noted. I assure you that Captain Reynolds and Ms. Bennett will not be on that aircraft, as you requested. Jasmine nodded acknowledgement without turning back. As she re-entered the cabin, passengers broke into spontaneous applause. The symbolic victory was theirs as much as hers, a small but significant pushback against the everyday indignities faced by so many. She returned to 14A, settled into her seat, and finally allowed herself to feel the emotional weight of the confrontation. What should have been a routine flight had transformed into a public statement about dignity, respect, and the persistent reality of bias in America. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell shifted uncomfortably. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I truly didn't recognize you. That, Jasmine replied, is precisely the problem. Flight 1422 remained at the gate for nearly 3 hours after the confrontation. Passengers were offered the option to deplane and take later flights, but remarkably few chose to leave. There was a sense of witnessing something significant, a rare moment when the usual power dynamics were fundamentally inverted. Marcus Bradford spent much of that time on the jetway, engaged in urgent phone calls with board members and PR consultants. Wingspan stock continued its downward trajectory as videos spread across social media platforms, garnering millions of views and igniting fierce debates about corporate responsibility and racial bias. Inside the cabin, flight attendants distributed complimentary snacks and beverages while offering increasingly profuse apologies for the delay. The service improvement was so dramatic that it bordered on comical. Crew members who had barely made eye contact with economy passengers now hovered attentively, addressing everyone with exaggerated courtesy. Jasmine used the time to review her presentation for tomorrow's conference, trying to maintain some normalcy amid the surreal circumstances. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell remained unnaturally still, staring straight ahead as if attempting to render himself invisible through sheer force of will. Maya Carter had become something of a celebrity among the passengers, her role as the first to stand up for Jasmine earning her widespread admiration. She handled the attention with grace, redirecting conversations toward the broader issues at stake rather than the specifics of the incident. This isn't just about one flight or one airline, Jasmine overheard her explaining to a curious passenger. It's about who gets the benefit of the doubt in our society and who doesn't. Shortly after noon, the aircraft door opened once more. Marcus Bradford entered, now dressed in a hastily acquired suit that still bore the creases of recent purchase. His previous fluster had been replaced by a grim determination as he made his way down the aisle directly to row 14. The cabin fell silent as he approached. Passengers reached for phones, anticipating another dramatic moment worth documenting. Bradford stopped beside Jasmine's seat and, to everyone's astonishment, lowered himself to one knee in the aisle. The posture wasn't merely deferential, it was deliberately humble, almost supplicant. Ms. Washington, he began, his voice pitched to carry throughout the hushed cabin, on behalf of Wingspan Airlines, I want to extend our deepest and most sincere apologies for your experience today. The theatrical nature of the gesture wasn't lost on Jasmine. This was performance as much as contrition, a calculated attempt to salvage both the company's reputation and her potential investment. Yet the public acknowledgement still mattered, regardless of motivation. The treatment you received was unacceptable, Bradford continued. It reflected failings in our training, our culture, and our leadership. My leadership. There is no excuse for what occurred, and we are committed to making substantive changes. Jasmine maintained her composure, acutely aware of the many eyes and cameras trained on her reaction. I appreciate your acknowledgement, Mr. Bradford. What specific changes do you envision? The question clearly caught him off guard. He had prepared for gracious acceptance of his apology, not a businesslike pivot to accountability measures. Well, I've already initiated a comprehensive review of our customer service protocols and diversity training programs, he stammered. And of course, there will be immediate personnel changes. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. Those are good first steps. I look forward to discussing more substantial structural reforms tomorrow during our investment meeting. For now, I believe everyone on this flight would appreciate departing for San Francisco. The subtle reminder of her financial leverage, and the many witnesses to Bradford's promises, was not lost on the CEO. He rose quickly, nodding with renewed purpose. Of course. I've personally authorized full refunds for every passenger on this flight, along with additional travel vouchers to compensate for the delay. A murmur of approval rippled through the cabin at this announcement. Bradford wasn't finished. Additionally, I want to address another matter, he said, turning toward Ethan Caldwell, who seemed to physically shrink under his gaze. Sir, I understand you were the passenger who initiated this incident by attempting to take Ms. Washington's seat and making inappropriate comments. Caldwell cleared his throat nervously. There was a misunderstanding. Our crew members have provided statements about what occurred, Bradford interrupted. Wingspan has a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. I must ask you to deplane immediately. The shocking reversal elicited gasps throughout the cabin. Just hours earlier, the airline had been ready to remove Jasmine for refusing to accommodate Caldwell's preferences. Now, the entitled passenger was being escorted off the aircraft by the CEO himself. Caldwell gathered his belongings with trembling hands, avoiding eye contact with other passengers as he shuffled toward the exit. The humiliation was palpable, his previously commanding presence diminished to something almost pitiable. As he passed Maya's seat, she spoke just loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Privilege is invisible to those who have it, until it's suddenly taken away. With Caldwell's departure, a palpable release of tension swept through the cabin. Spontaneous applause broke out, celebrating not just Jasmine's victory but a rare moment of accountability in a world where consequences often seemed reserved for those with less power and influence. Bradford paused at the front of the cabin before exiting. We expect to begin boarding procedures shortly. Thank you for your patience, and again, my sincerest apologies for today's disruption. As he disappeared through the door, Jasmine reflected on the day's events. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, money can't buy respect, Jasmine. But sometimes it can force people to show their true colors. Pearl Washington had raised her granddaughter with an unshakable sense of dignity, teaching her to stand firm in her worth regardless of how others perceived her. Even in the projects of Mechanicsville, Grandma Pearl had carried herself with a quiet pride that demanded respect. Never let anyone make you feel small, she would say. Your worth isn't determined by their judgment. Today, Jasmine had honored that teaching. Not by flexing her financial power, though that had ultimately forced the airline's hand, but by refusing to accept treatment that violated her basic dignity. Carlos approached her seat, his earlier dismissiveness replaced with genuine contrition. Ms. Washington, he said quietly, I want to personally apologize for my role in what happened. I should have verified the seat assignments immediately instead of making assumptions. Unlike the CEO's calculated performance, Carlos's remorse seemed authentic. Jasmine appreciated the distinction. We all have biases, Carlos, she replied. The question is whether we're willing to recognize and address them. He nodded thoughtfully. This has been educational. Thank you for your grace under pressure. As Carlos returned to his duties, Maya leaned across the aisle again. That was quite something, she observed. I've never seen a CEO kneel in apology before. Jasmine smiled wryly. Bradford wasn't kneeling to me. He was kneeling to 12% ownership and the prospect of more. Still, Maya persisted, you used that leverage for something important. That matters. It shouldn't require being a billionaire to be treated with basic respect, Jasmine countered. No, Maya agreed, it shouldn't. But until the world changes, I'm glad there are people like you willing to use their influence to push for that change. The conversation was interrupted by a fresh round of activity at the front of the aircraft. New flight attendants boarded, replacing the crew involved in the incident. The replacement team moved efficiently through pre-departure preparations, their professionalism untainted by the morning's events. The lead replacement attendant approached Jasmine with a respectful nod. Ms. Washington, we're ready for departure whenever you're comfortable. Is there anything you need before we get underway? The deference was striking, and revealing. The same airline that had threatened to remove her hours earlier now wouldn't leave the gate without her explicit approval. I'm ready whenever the aircraft is, Jasmine replied, consciously rejecting the special treatment. And please, treat me just like any other passenger in seat 14A. The attendant nodded, though they both knew that was impossible now. The dynamics had irreversibly shifted, the mask of anonymity permanently lifted. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, Jasmine gazed out the window at the LaGuardia tarmac. Somewhere in the private aviation section sat her own jet, fueled and ready yet deliberately unused. She had chosen to fly commercial to experience Wingspan as an ordinary customer. That experiment had revealed far more than she had anticipated about both the airline and herself. The captain's voice came over the intercom, a new captain, his tone carefully neutral as he welcomed passengers aboard and apologized for the delay. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of reflection on the day's unexpected journey, one that had covered significant distance before the plane had even left the ground. The 6-hour flight to San Francisco proceeded without further incident. The replacement crew provided impeccable service to all passengers regardless of seating class, a marked improvement that several travelers noted aloud was surprisingly non-discriminatory. Jasmine spent most of the flight preparing for her keynote address at Tech Forward, occasionally glancing at news alerts about Wingspan Airlines. The company's stock had stabilized after Bradford's public apology but remained down nearly 4%, a significant hit representing hundreds of millions in market value. The empty seat beside her attracted curious glances from passing passengers. Some offered supportive comments or thumbs-up gestures as they walked by, having recognized her from the videos now circulating widely online. Jasmine acknowledged them with polite nods but maintained her focus on her work, determined not to let the morning's events derail her professional obligations. During a lull in her preparation, Carlos approached with a fresh cup of tea. "I thought you might like this," he said, placing it carefully on her tray table. "It's not on the menu, but I always travel with some good loose-leaf oolong." The personal touch felt genuine rather than performative. Jasmine thanked him and took a sip of the fragrant tea. "May I speak candidly for a moment?" Carlos asked, glancing around to ensure no other passengers were listening closely. Jasmine nodded, curious. "What happened today happens all the time," he said quietly. "Usually in smaller ways that don't make headlines or trend on Twitter. As crew members, we see it, but the system, it doesn't encourage us to intervene." "You mean you're actively discouraged from addressing discrimination?" Jasmine asked. Carlos hesitated. "Not explicitly. But we're evaluated on efficiency, passenger satisfaction scores from premium customers, on-time departures. Confronting a Diamond member means risking complaints, bad reviews, even our jobs if they're connected enough." The systemic nature of the problem clarified further for Jasmine. Individual biases were reinforced by corporate policies that prioritized certain customers' comfort over others' dignity. "I'm sharing this not as an excuse," Carlos continued, "but because if you're serious about creating change at Wingspan, that's where it needs to start. The metrics, the incentives, they shape behavior more than any diversity training ever could." "I appreciate the insight," Jasmine replied. "Would you be willing to speak with me more formally about this? Perhaps provide specific examples of policies that could be reformed?" Carlos looked surprised by the request. "You'd want my input? I'm just a lead flight attendant." "You're exactly the person who should be consulted," Jasmine countered. Frontline employees understand the real-world impact of corporate policies better than any executive ever could. Their conversation was interrupted by Maya, who had returned from using the lavatory. "Sorry to intrude," she said, "but I thought you should know that your story has gone international. BBC and Al Jazeera are both running segments on the wingspan discrimination incident." Jasmine sighed, mixed emotions washing over her. The attention would inevitably complicate her life in the coming days, yet the visibility might force meaningful accountability in an industry where discriminatory treatment often went unchallenged. "Mr. Bradford has also released an official statement," Maya added, showing Jasmine her phone screen. "He's announced an emergency board meeting and the suspension of both Captain Reynolds and Rebecca pending a full investigation." The swift action confirmed Jasmine's suspicions about Bradford's priorities. He was desperately trying to contain the PR damage before their investment meeting tomorrow. The suspensions were likely performative rather than reflective of genuine organizational change. "People's livelihoods are at stake," Jasmine noted, her expression troubled. "That wasn't my intention." "You didn't create this situation," Maya reminded her gently. "You simply refused to accept mistreatment that others might have endured in silence." As the flight progressed, Jasmine found herself increasingly drawn to conversations with Maya. The marketing executive possessed a sharp intellect and nuanced understanding of corporate culture that resonated with Jasmine's own experiences. "I've been following your career since your first round of funding," Maya admitted. "As one of the few black women in senior marketing roles in tech, I've found your journey inspirational." "Marketing for tech companies? Which one?" Jasmine asked, her professional curiosity piqued. "I founded Carter Brand Strategies 5 years ago," Maya replied. "We specialize in helping tech companies connect authentically with diverse audiences. Our client list includes SageCore Technologies and Meridian Networks." Jasmine's eyebrows rose in recognition. "Both excellent companies with strong diversity initiatives. Your firm's work on Meridian's community outreach program was particularly impressive." The conversation shifted into a comfortable exchange of industry insights and shared experiences navigating predominantly white male spaces. For the first time since boarding, Jasmine felt herself truly relaxing, the professional mask she wore so consistently slipping to reveal more of her authentic self. As the aircraft began its descent into San Francisco, Jasmine made a decision. She pulled out a business card and handed it to Maya. "I'd like to continue our conversation," she said. "My team has been looking for a marketing partner for our new financial literacy initiative targeting underserved communities. Your experience seems perfectly aligned with our goals." Maya accepted the card with genuine surprise. "I'd be honored to discuss it further." "Good," Jasmine smiled. "Because I think Wingspan Airlines might also benefit from your expertise in the near future, assuming they're sincere about institutional change." The landing announcement interrupted their conversation. As passengers prepared for arrival, Jasmine turned her attention to the approaching California coastline visible through her window. The day had begun with a simple desire for anonymity and ended with her at the center of a national conversation about race, privilege, and corporate accountability. When the aircraft finally reached the gate at San Francisco International Airport, Jasmine was surprised to see a group of Wingspan executives waiting on the jetway. Their anxious expressions confirmed that the company's damage control efforts were still in high gear. More surprising was the media presence visible through the terminal windows, journalists and camera crews positioned strategically to capture her emergence from the aircraft. Ms. Washington, the lead Wingspan representative, approached as she stepped onto the jetway. "We've arranged private transportation to your hotel and security to ensure your comfort." The offer of special treatment, so different from her morning experience, highlighted the arbitrary nature of privilege. Nothing about her as a person had changed, only their perception of her value had shifted. "That won't be necessary," she replied. "I've made my own arrangements." As she entered the terminal alongside Maya, camera flashes erupted. Reporters called out questions about the incident, about Wingspan's response, about her plans for tomorrow's investment meeting. Jasmine paused, considering whether to engage. The spotlight was uncomfortable but potentially useful. After a moment's reflection, she stepped toward the waiting microphones. "What happened today was unfortunately not unique," she began, her voice steady and clear. "The only unique aspect was that I had the resources and platform to refuse treatment that many travelers experience daily without recourse." She continued with measured words, neither condemning Wingspan outright nor absolving them of responsibility. "I look forward to speaking with Wingspan's leadership about concrete steps toward creating an environment where all passengers are treated with equal dignity and respect." A reporter called out, "Will you be withdrawing your investment in the company?" Jasmine's response was diplomatic but firm, "That depends entirely on their commitment to substantive change rather than superficial apologies. Actions will speak louder than words." With that statement, she concluded the impromptu press conference and continued through the terminal, Maya beside her. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and decisions about Wingspan's future, and her role in shaping it. For now, though, Jasmine felt a quiet satisfaction. Her grandmother's lessons about standing firm in her dignity had served her well today. Pearl Washington had taught her that true respect couldn't be bought with money or status, it had to be claimed through unwavering self-worth and the courage to demand fair treatment. As she stepped into the California sunshine, Jasmine smiled at the thought of calling Grandma Pearl tonight. The story would make her proud, not because her granddaughter had flexed her billionaire influence, but because she had refused to be moved from her rightful place. 1 month later, Jasmine stood at the podium in the main exhibition hall of the Moscone Center, the culmination of Tech Forward having arrived with her closing keynote address. The audience of 3,000 industry leaders, investors, and innovators listened with rapt attention as she departed from her planned speech about financial technology to address the elephant in the room. "I came to San Francisco last month to talk about democratizing financial access," she began, her voice confident and measured. "Instead, I found myself at the center of a conversation about something more fundamental, human dignity and who is deemed worthy of basic respect in our society." The massive screens flanking the stage displayed news headlines about what had come to be known simply as the Wingspan incident. The viral videos had collectively garnered over 70 million views across platforms, sparking intense discussions about corporate accountability, implicit bias, and the different standards applied to passengers based on appearance and perceived status. "What happened on that flight wasn't just about one airline or one crew's actions," Jasmine continued. "It revealed patterns that exist throughout our institutions, including the tech industry we all inhabit." She paused, surveying the predominantly white and male audience. "How many of you have walked into investor meetings and been mistaken for someone's assistant? How many have had your expertise questioned in ways your colleagues never experience? How many have modified your appearance, your speech, your very self to fit into spaces not designed with you in mind?" Throughout the crowd, heads nodded, particularly among the women and people of color in attendance. The shared experience created a palpable connection that transcended the formality of the keynote format. "Today, I'm announcing the launch of the Washington Equity Initiative," Jasmine revealed, as the screens shifted to display the new foundation's logo. "With an initial funding commitment of $50 million, we will support Black entrepreneurs in tech, focusing particularly on those developing solutions for underserved communities." The announcement drew spontaneous applause. Jasmine waited for it to subside before continuing. "But corporate philanthropy alone cannot create systemic change. That requires institutional transformation from within." The screens shifted again, now displaying the Wingspan Airlines logo alongside new diversity metrics and policy changes. "Following our investment meeting, Wingspan Airlines has agreed to implement industry-leading anti-discrimination protocols with measurable accountability metrics," Jasmine explained. "These include revising customer satisfaction measurements to include feedback from all passengers, not just premium travelers, implementing comprehensive bias training led by experts rather than generic corporate programs. And perhaps most importantly, changing promotion and compensation structures to reward inclusive service rather than preferential treatment of high-status customers." In the front row, Marcus Bradford sat with several Wingspan board members. Their expressions reflected a complex mixture of corporate determination and lingering discomfort with the public nature of their company's transformation. "I chose to increase our investment in Wingspan," Jasmine revealed, "but with conditions that prioritize cultural change over quick PR fixes." Captain Reynolds and flight attendant Rebecca Bennett were not simply scapegoats for a systemic problem. After a thorough review process, both have chosen to participate in the company's new ambassador program, where they share their experiences and learnings with colleagues throughout the organization. The approach reflected Jasmine's philosophy that lasting change required rehabilitation rather than mere punishment, creating pathways for growth rather than simply discarding those who exhibited bias. As for Ethan Caldwell, she continued, addressing the question many have been curious about, his investment firm has experienced significant client departures following the incident. Several major pension funds and university endowments have withdrawn their business, citing concerns about the firm's culture and leadership values. The market consequences for Caldwell's behavior demonstrated that financial penalties could provide powerful incentives for behavioral change, a reality Jasmine understood all too well from her work in economic systems. "But perhaps the most meaningful outcome has been a partnership I never expected," Jasmine said with a genuine smile. "I'm pleased to announce that Carter Brand Strategies will be leading Wingspan's cultural transformation initiative as well as collaborating with FinFreedom on our community financial literacy programs." Maya Carter stood from her seat in the second row, acknowledging the announcement with a graceful wave as applause filled the hall. Her firm had more than doubled its staff in the past month to accommodate the new clients, creating jobs while advancing the cause of corporate inclusivity. "The woman who first stood up for me on that flight," Jasmine explained, "has now become a valued business partner and, I'm honored to say, a friend." Sometimes our most important connections emerge from moments of conflict, if we're willing to stand firm in our principles while remaining open to unexpected alliances. As she concluded her address, Jasmine reflected on the month's whirlwind developments. The incident that began with a simple refusal to surrender her assigned seat had catalyzed changes far beyond anything she could have anticipated. FinFreedom had launched a new app feature helping users identify and support minority-owned businesses, creating economic ripples throughout communities traditionally excluded from investment opportunities. Wingspan had begun implementing reforms that were already influencing policies at other airlines. Most surprisingly, several tech CEOs who had witnessed the incident firsthand had initiated diversity reviews within their own companies, recognizing patterns they had previously overlooked. True transformation, Jasmine told the audience in her closing remarks, begins with small moments of courage, the willingness to say no when dignity demands it, even if convenience suggests otherwise. Change rarely comes from comfortable places. It emerges when we refuse to accept the unacceptable, even at personal cost. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 3 minutes. Later that evening, as Jasmine prepared for her flight back to New York, her phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Pearl, "Saw you on the news again. Still using your big brain and strong spine. That's my girl." The simple message brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. For all the corporate transformations and policy changes she had helped initiate, her grandmother's approval remained her most treasured measure of success. At San Francisco International Airport, Jasmine approached the Wingspan Airlines counter with her regular ID, no disguise this time. The ticket agent recognized her immediately, eyes widening. "Ms. Washington. We've been instructed to offer you our premium services, including—" "Thank you," Jasmine interrupted gently, "but I'll just take my assigned seat in Economy Plus, please." The agent looked confused. "But surely you'd prefer first class. Mr. Bradford has authorized." "My preference," Jasmine explained with a smile, "is for all passengers to receive equally respectful service regardless of status or appearance. The best way to assess that is from my assigned seat, just like any other traveler." As she boarded the aircraft, Jasmine noticed the subtle but meaningful differences from her previous Wingspan experience. Flight attendants greeted all passengers with consistent courtesy. The crew made eye contact with everyone, not just those in premium cabins. Small changes, perhaps, but indicative of a shifting mindset. Settling into her window seat in 14A, the same seat assignment she'd had a month earlier, Jasmine felt a sense of coming full circle. The journey that had begun with a confrontation was ending with the first tangible signs of transformation. The empty middle seat beside her was soon occupied by a young black woman in her early 20s, clearly nervous about flying. Jasmine smiled reassuringly at her. "First flight?" she asked. "That obvious, huh?" the woman replied with an embarrassed laugh. "I'm heading to New York for my first job interview after college. Software engineering position." "You're going to do great," Jasmine assured her. "The tech world needs more voices like yours." As the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, Jasmine reflected on how different this young woman's journey might be because of doors that she and others had helped to open. There would still be obstacles and biases to overcome, certainly, but perhaps a few fewer than before. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, carrying Jasmine Washington back to New York, a different person than when she had left, changed not by the public attention or corporate influence she had wielded, but by the simple, powerful act of refusing to move when dignity required her to stand her ground. This powerful story teaches us that dignity is not negotiable, regardless of social status. Jasmine's refusal to give up her seat wasn't about stubbornness but about maintaining her fundamental right to be treated with respect. We learn that discrimination often hides in small, everyday interactions that many endure silently. The story demonstrates how privilege operates invisibly until challenged. Ethan Caldwell's behavior reflected deeply ingrained assumptions about who deserves accommodation and respect. When power dynamics suddenly shifted, the true nature of conditional respect was exposed. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine showed that meaningful change requires more than individual confrontation, it demands systemic transformation. By leveraging her unique position to implement structural changes at Wingspan, she created impact beyond her personal experience. The partnership with Maya reminds us that allies matter. Sometimes standing up for what's right creates unexpected connections that multiply our ability to affect change. True respect cannot be bought with wealth or status, it must be claimed through unwavering self-worth and the courage to demand fair treatment. As Grandma Pearl taught Jasmine, our dignity is inherent, not granted by others' recognition. What would you do if faced with discrimination like Jasmine experienced? Would you have stood your ground or chosen a different approach? Have you witnessed similar situations in your own life? Comment below and share your perspective. If this story about overcoming racism resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful content that highlights these important issues. Share with someone who needs this message of courage and dignity today. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most compelling racism stories of our time. Remember that sometimes the most significant changes begin with refusing to accept the unacceptable. Until next time, stand firm in your worth and keep making a difference in your corner of the world.